something interesting is sure to happen. Well, I think you ought to tell me who you are first. Mr. Rabbit? Then why did you ask the question?
Goodness, this is quite extraordinary.
Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?
But today is turning into the most curious adventure I have ever had.
Welcome to the Alice in Wonderland podcast. This is a place for you to open your mind and let your sense of wonder, imagination, and most importantly, your curiosity loose. So I'm your host, Georgia Ellis, and today I'm joined by what I think is the super cool Guy Lawrence. So somebody that I really look up to in the industry that he's in. So welcome, Guy.
Thank you for having me. This is an honor. The last time we were doing this, we were being interviewed together on Joy FM. Yeah, the Hot Entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was so much fun, wasn't it?
It was awesome. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah. I love getting out there and sharing our messages to the world. So let's get curious with you, Guy. I'm going to ask you a question. So you've heard of the story Alice in Wonderland, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So a 7-year-old girl finds her place in this really different world. So I want you to imagine that I'm Alice. I'm this 7-year-old girl, and I'm wandering through Wonderland, and I bump into Guy Lawrence. And I say, Guy, what do you do in the world? What do you do in Wonderland? How would you respond to a 7-year-old child to tell them what you do?
To a 7-year-old?
Yeah, let's keep this, let's see if we can keep it simple.
Okay, I would say to a 7-year-old, I would say with a big smiling face, I'm a treasure hunter.
Ooh.
And then they'd probably ask me, well, what treasures do you find? And then I would just say, I've spent the last 10 years ferociously looking within the wellness industry. So how to make people, I guess, the best versions of ourselves beyond health, and try to figure out what is required to allow us to flourish in that space. And I've taken those bits of treasure and developed a little bit of a map for other people if they want to come and find out some of the gold that I've found along the way. That's what I'd probably say.
And how powerful is that?
But yeah, very, very.
Yeah, because that's exactly what you do, right? So you've been on this amazing journey, and yeah, you found all these pieces of treasure, and now you can turn around and say, hey people, here's the map, and here's how you can move through your life. So talk to me a little bit about some of the treasures that you've found and how you got to find those treasures. Is there any treasure in particular that stands out for you?
Well, probably what I teach now, but before sort of giving that away, because it can kind of sound a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Like confusing at first. People don't understand it. Like ultimately I teach meditation, and I use the language of neuroscience to help people facilitate change and how they combine together. But quite often we don't even realize we want change, or there's a lot of things going on that we're just completely not aware of and we accept it to be. So normally the pain has to become very great first before we start implementing that action, and so that's what I normally get into. So quite often people give me a kind of, oh, that's interesting, but then let it go, unless they want to dig when you can see they're ready. But for me, the treasures, it's really been interesting, especially when I look back, when you could say, I started becoming more aware of what was going on in the health industry, to what I've been taught, to what's actually going on. And the moment I started seeing conflict, this was going back probably nearly 15 years ago, my beliefs were getting challenged. It was all around the low-fat diet at the time. It was all about carb loading in the fitness industry and all these things that were going on. And yet, when I was following these protocols, it wasn't actually adding up. So I started to get curious, but it was very difficult at the time because I didn't realize how much just my upbringing and my outlook, or the way I was perceiving the world at the time, was actually influencing my biasness to the way I was seeing things. And it was very hard to come back to what I love to call a beginner's mind. back to neutral and back to just being open and just pretending like you're learning something for the first time again, which I think is wonderful. So each sort of thing that kind of challenged me, I finally started to learn to become curious as opposed to closed off. I became skeptical instead of cynicism, sorry, because it's very easy to become a cynic very quickly and we're not even aware of what's going on. And each treasure led to another treasure along the way. And it was almost like these breadcrumbs you start following and you go, oh my God, I never knew this. And then you dig a little bit further and I never knew that. And then it kept leading me on this path to what I believe today, or what I teach actually almost like covers all the other things. Because if you start to get your mindset right in a way, and the way you see yourself and the way you see the world, and if you can start to align, I guess, more with like not only just from the head, but align the head to the heart. So we feel like we're on purpose. We feel like got our internal compass more aligned to a more meaningful direction in life that's given us much more joy and happiness from it. Then I find the other things within, especially the health industry, that I was actually looking for in the first place. Well, is it low fat? Should we be keto? Should we be paleo? Should I cut out sugar? Should I be exercising more? Should I train in the morning? Should I train? Oh my God, should I fast? Like, what's going on? Like, it's just information.
So much out there.
It's but the moment that I really started to align the head, the heart, the compass, the purpose, the life, and driven, and started looking beyond myself to actually help others in a way, because I kind of I've found my happiness within myself, then all the other stuff really started to look after themselves. And you just have a much more playful, great attitude towards things, as opposed to like clinging on to them for dear life, hoping it's going to change an internal struggle that's probably well beyond actually tweaking a few things of what you might eat, if all that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they are the kind of things I was looking at along the way. And I've gone off on a complete tangent, but I think what triggered a lot of it was being in the fitness industry. When I got to Australia, I was really passionate about just getting involved and trying to learn more. And then that's when I started to see the conflicting data. But then I started working with people with cancer patients. And that really started to teach me to value my life and what I actually had, and allowed me to help drop my own stories and start to say, hey, there's always going to be somebody worse off. There's always going to be somebody going on. And just being actually make direct changes within nutrition, within movement, within mindset, you can have a really positive impact. And that, I guess, was the first time that gave me a taste of something that was like, oh my God, this is so rewarding and so amazing. And then from there, my old company, 180 Nutrition, was born. And then I really was getting ferocious and trying to figure it all out. So I actually set up a podcast back in 2012, I think it was, or 13 at the time, which I'm no longer a part of. But when podcasting was just sort of really starting to take off, I was using that as a platform and an excuse to actually start reaching out to people to really have conversations like we're having today, to find out what the hell was going on. And in that space of nearly 5 years that I was doing that podcast with 180 Nutrition, I think we did over 150 interviews. I've interviewed some of phenomenal people, that are experts in all different genres. And because the brand did so well, the reach was quite incredible towards the end. I think we had over 3 million downloads when I stepped down at the beginning. And that's just iTunes alone. That's not YouTube or transcript reads or anything. But what it allowed me to do was just continue to have these conversations, but then I was actually implementing it. I was actually it wasn't just philosophy. Like, we're such great philosophers. We love consuming information all the time, and we get ferocious. And I go, oh my God, that's amazing. But taking information and actually applying it and turn it into an actionable thing that's changing your life, very few people do. Like, it's almost like we get comfort from the information, but we don't implement the changes that we're actually hankering for. And I always wondered why. Like, what stops us? So that's why I ended up starting to look more at neuroscience. My camera's just come off, is it?
Yeah, that's all right. We've got a lovely picture of you, so you can keep
Okay. Okay. Oh, there you go. I'm back. so I started looking at more of this language of neuroscience and meditation, and started to understand and dig deeper here, because it was having such an impact on my life. I was getting very, like, there was like this awakening in me that was almost something bigger than me was just bursting to come out, and I was frightened of it at first, and I was trying to contain it, but eventually I started feeding it. and from that started looking at all aspects. And when I realized I was so misaligned by what I'd been taught with nutrition and what's coming out now and what's becoming quite normal and accepted in society, but 10, 12 years ago, it certainly wasn't. It was taboo. But it really taught me a valuable lesson to go, hey, if I've been taught this, but it's looking like this, but I've just lived the last 30 years on a belief that that was the way it's supposed to be, then I need to be a bit more open-minded. So if I'm wrong there, what else am I wrong in? You know, and I started to open up and explore things. And a lot of things were definitely challenging my belief, especially about who we are, around consciousness and around all, and how that can influence us and the way, like, deep-rooted fundamental beliefs then. So it kind of just went to this journey, just started really opening up and evolved. And I just kept leaning in and running with it as opposed to hiding from it.
Yeah, so you've been a real learner and really opened up. And one of the things I love that you said was, I think you said a beginner's mindset. Is that what you said earlier on?
Yes.
So having that clean slate and going, okay, I'm just going to let what has come before, I'm just going to suspend that and just be open-minded and just see where this journey takes me. One of the things that I love that you said there was around and I want to dig a little bit deeper, was around this taking it from philosophy and applying it. I know, like, I've just attended a 3-day workshop with 300 people in it, getting bucket loads of information. And I know that out of the 300 people in the room, very few will apply the great work that has been, or the great information that has been imparted with them. For you, what have you found has been the tools for you to move from philosopher to, I think it's initiate, or someone who actually does it? What's something for you? How did you get past that?
Yeah, great question. I think it boils down to belief.
Yeah.
I think if we actually believed we could do it, we would go and do it. So if we're not doing it, then there has to be a belief somewhere holding us back. And for me, the first time I really started implementing things and creating change, I made a real mistake. And it was a life lesson mistake, but the mistake taught me some invaluable lessons to really capitulate my going forward in the right direction. And that was, I would been to different seminars like that, where the information is phenomenal and I'm all in. I'm like, right. And I come back and I think, right, because you get that point where you're hyped up, you're motivated. And then the first 2 weeks are great. And then that kind of momentum kind of pitters off. And for me, there was definitely a lot of stop-start with that kind of thing at first. And the mistake I made was that I really had it in my head that I was going to build a business and make lots of money. And then I would figure out my happiness because I'd have money. And never, I was doing it subconsciously. And I reckon if you boil it down to, most people are in their jobs because of the security and the money it brings, not through the joy and happiness it gives them. I'm not saying everyone's like that, but I would say, if you had an honest conversation for an hour with someone, I reckon they'd open up and admit that, right? So, but this was before 180 Nutrition. This was because I decided I was going to be a stock trader and I was going to make money that way. So I almost started overreaching. I started taking bigger decisions, riskier decisions, where there's definitely an element of risk, but the missing ingredient for me at the time was I wasn't aligned in my heart with it, but I didn't even know it at the time. I was just rallying myself up to do these things. And then I found I dug a much bigger hole for myself than when I actually started. And all of a sudden the ships were completely burnt. So for me to start to implement that change initially, I had ships burnt. I was no way going back. I was in a hole. I think, oh my God. But then a few life lessons along the way, synchronicities in life, made me reconsider what I was doing with everything. And especially when I started working with people with cancer, it made me reevaluate what I was actually doing and putting out to the world. So I think that was a big fundamental piece for me to start going there. So my motivations became heart aligned and more pure than just trying to feel like I'm slogging uphill every day, because my values and of what was the values of what was the fuel was not aligned. So it wasn't driving me. And the moment I got really passionate about something, because it was beyond me, it was beyond my pity, it was beyond my insecurities, it was beyond my financial situations, it was genuinely to actually have an impact on somebody else's life. And the moment I could see that and align with it and realize I was onto something here, then it all drops away. Like all the excuses, all the lay-ins, all the late nights that you might go out drinking with your buddies or whatever it is, it all falls. And the moment that purpose becomes greater than yourself in a really positive way, and it all becomes aligned, it doesn't feel like work anymore. It doesn't feel effortless. And then I just kept leaning in, and every day, and then you start getting momentum. You're getting momentum in the right way. And I think that's what we really need to look at when starting out on this journey. Are we aligned? Are we doing it all for the right reasons? Mm. And if we're not, I think we're always going to be pushing shit uphill. And we're always going to be.
How did you find, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there, because one of the things I come across, a lot of people, they don't know what their purpose is or what they're supposed to be doing. So for you, you've just shared you're doing trade, stock market trading, and you found that it was, just basically you're after the money. Then when I get the money, I'll have the happiness. So you went from being what I'll call selfish to selfless and that selflessness became your interwoven with your passion or your purpose. How did you discover this purpose, this passion? What was it? What was the turning point?
Well, to help listeners as well, because my turning point was an accumulation of things that just aligned, right? But I think you need to taste the buffet of life. Like if you think change is going to happen by just doing the same routine, the same day in, day out, the same job and going for it, you have to get uncomfortable, and you have to start not uncomfortable to the point that I did, but otherwise uncomfortableness is going to come anyway, because there's going to be a promise, there's going to be a greater thing within you that's going to cause, a potentially an illness and a resentment. Like it all builds up inside and it might take us 30 years to do that, because we look back and think, shit, what have I done with my life, kind of thing. So I was never content, because I was willing to listen to the voice inside of me in the first place. So I was exploring, if you like, but every time I failed, I got something wrong, it gave me really good feedback, and I thought, shit, I'm not doing that again. But it's about finding that balance. Like you can only do it by playing the game, I think. So if you honor yourself with a truer commitment to go, you know what, I'm sick of this job or this life I'm living or what I'm doing right now. I'm gonna start exploring things, because I think it's in the feedback that helps starts bumping us across to finally find what it is that we want. But if we're expecting that to come by not exploring anything, then how can it happen? Like, how can change come without changing anything? Yeah. So we get blinded by, I want answers, but I think the answers come when you're on the journey, not when you arrive at the destination.
Yeah, and I love that, because I see so many people caught in, bogged down and caught in, let's call it a rut, for want of a better term. So they got a job, they get up every day, they go through the same routine, they go to work, they get triggered by the same people and they do the same sort of work and they're feeling the same sort of way. Then they go home to their family and then they go to bed and they wake up and they do it again. So we're in that ritual of life that they have. I wouldn't even call it a ritual, it's a routine. This routine of life, where is there even an opportunity for them to discover something that they might be passionate about? If they're not getting out there and just taking a chance and going to maybe a Guy Lawrence workshop, or going to reading a different type of book, eating a different type of food, hanging out with different types of people, and just experiencing life, that starts to bring towards you, like what you're saying, opportunities to work out what you don't want. And I love your analogy there, it's bumping you back in. Oh, I didn't like that, back on track. Oh, I love that. And that's sort of taking me down here. And then something else comes along and you start to get bumped in and out of a new path. But if you're not making those changes and getting, what you're saying, curious or interested and experimenting, well then ain't going to happen.
It just won't. We're so hard on ourselves, and we overcomplicate things. Like I'm a pretty simple guy, honestly, and I just learned by having to experience something, and I love to use the analogy of, there's that life begins just outside your comfort zone. There's a beautiful circle and that's your comfort zone. And if you go to the edge, I just flirt with the edges constantly. I dip my toe out and I come back a bit and give myself some breathing space, but I keep leaning into that edge. And that's when it starts to reveal the path for us. But I truly believe now, as I've gotten older, life is made up of initiations and lessons. And it's like this big school kind of thing. And if we're willing to get ourselves out there, then we start learning from the school of life. We're so boxed in society by the way we should learn, and we identify ourselves by our qualifications and how much money we earn. And there's a structure behind it, and it becomes our complete identity from that. And the moment we stray outside the box, it's like, it becomes this foreign thing. But for me, it's the other way around. I spend most of the time now outside the box, continually just exploring. It becomes very normal, but it allows me to expand myself, expands my mind, and it allows me to help other people directly that I think I'm helping more so through my actions and not just what I say. It's very easy to say anything. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to, and even from an educated standpoint, how many people have gone and spent 5 years of study and got qualifications and then realized the real world actually started the moment they stepped outside of that, thinking it was like, great, I've got this, I'm now going to do this. It doesn't work like that. No. God, you know what I mean? So I don't even know where I was ended up with this, but it's so important. So if we really want to start looking at changes, I believe we need to start looking at our own. We need to turn the lens, the camera lens, from the external world back into the eternal world. Because the moment you start to do that and start to get to know thyself, start learning to observe your fears, your doubts, your concerns, who you think you are, what have you been telling yourself? Are you, like, when you start digging under the surface and start willing to look there, then you're going to have a whole set of beliefs that you've probably told yourself about yourself, who you think you are. And obviously when we get them challenged, we don't like it normally. So it obviously takes courage to start looking at that. But for me, I believe now it's focusing on those things that are holding you back. And if you can start to work through the things the belief systems that you have underneath, the way will start to show itself naturally, because as the path presents itself, you're not going to use excuses or fear to hold you back. You're actually going to keep leaning in and taking that unknown path. And it's going to reveal its destination much quicker than doing nothing.
Yeah, and then you'll find, if we loop back to what we were talking about before, once you get information, it no longer becomes philosophy. Now you are more aligned to it and you will take the action, right? So you start becoming more aligned. one of the things you said there, which I think is super uber powerful, is you use the words who you think you are. Think about who you think you are. So I'd love to unpack that, because I think a lot of people, so we'll use you as an example. I know we haven't gone down your personal story, but you grew up in Wales. Correct. Who did you think you were then?
When I grew up in Wales, I thought I was, I was quite a reserved, shy, introverted person. But when I was with my mates, I was this loud, drinking, larrikin rugby player that drew all confidence and identified himself by how much beer he could drink and how well he could play his game of rugby. And then that was socially acceptable in the realms of my culture that I grew up in. But the whole time that was going on, there was a voice in me that was going, this ain't right. What are you doing? I was a plumber as well. I didn't want to be a plumber. I had no idea. Like, do you know what I mean? And it was just, there you go, guy. Welcome to your life in Wales.
Yeah.
And I love Wales, and I wouldn't change any of it. But growing up, that's who I identified myself with.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, I know now, 25 years on or whatever it is, I know that's not me. And I know we evolve and mature as well. But at the same time, there were key decisions along the way that I knew in my heart of hearts that weren't right. And I could have accepted it. And I did something which I'm really pleased with, was go against the grain of what I was culturally expected to be, of who I led to believe, because there was something stronger inside me. And I made certain decisions that were so hard at the time, but it allowed me to continue to grow and evolve. And I think there's a delicacy right there, is like along the way, and especially as we're younger, we don't really have the tools, especially or the education to make big decisions, especially when it comes to our life, right? And, and we rely upon our peers and people around us to help us. But so the person I was then to the person I was 5-10 years later, even the person I am now, I know is going to change and evolve to this moment. But I'm willing to allow and accept that more and more these days, and just flow with life as opposed to try and force an outcome. And I still do to these days sometimes get caught up in that old program, and I still get caught up in that guy of 30 years ago sometimes still comes out. It's not like I'm immune to it, but I'm much more consciously aware. And I think that's where the beauty of the work that we do really can start to allow people a space to start getting curious and start looking at these things. And the one thing I want to stress as well, it doesn't matter when we start to look at it. I think the main thing is that we become aware. And if we start to consciously raise our consciousness, because that's what I believe we're doing, it's a good thing, but it can be a scary thing because we're really stepping into the unknown. And we always want structure and we want known, but from that, a greater joy and a greater understanding comes, because then the game never ends. The learning never ends. The evolution of us never ends then. And there's always a question, is there more? And that's what drives me now. Like I'm always just curious.
Yeah.
And it gives you much more fulfillment than anything ever has, so.
I love what you said there, the evolution of who we are, because I think based on, there's people out there who aren't happy with what's going on in their life. And if it's one of our listeners right now, you're going, I'm feeling a bit stuck. I'm feeling a bit, I just don't feel happy or whatever it is. Ask yourself, am I evolving? Have I changed in the last 2 years, 12 months, 5? Am I just still in this? This is why you feel stuck, because you're not moving, you're not growing, you're not evolving yourself. And I think that if you listen to what you've just said then, Wales football player, beer drinker, you have evolved from that over a period of time to where you are now, completely different. And you even admitted that I'm not going to be the same person in, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, because you're continually evolving. And I think that's the magic, that's the playfulness of life, isn't it? Well, who can I be?
Yeah. Exactly. Who can you be?
What can
And
I
then,
try?
and then once you flip it, and it's almost like a game. It's almost like this. There's so much joy that can come out of that, and then you start truly getting addicted and running by the hormones of joy, not stress.
Yeah.
And then if you can continue that, life opens up in so many mysterious ways. It truly does. But I think we almost have to, we have to, we have to have courage. Like we have to apply that in our life, and the only way we can learn and be courageous is actually by being and doing something courageous, to then understand what that feels like. And then when we go through that, we learn a part of ourselves that we've just overcome, because we've had a belief around something for so long, and we finally not let it imprison us anymore. We bust through that glass ceiling, and we come out the other side by taking those steps of courage. And then you can look back and go, wow, I really learned something about myself there. And you go, if that was not real, and that was this box I'd been confined myself in for so long in that particular area, shit, what else do I need to look at?
Yeah.
And then you could just keep going and unpacking it,
Because if you look at it, we look back at you, you've got a telescope now, you're looking back to the rugby playing, and you go, oh wow, I've evolved, I've done this, and it's just not who I was. There's been this journey, and you may not even be able to pinpoint all of the turning points, but you can actually start to see the growth. By looking back, does that excite you about moving forward?
Absolutely. When I still pinch myself and look at some of the things that have happened in my life and achieved and done. I go, shit, was that me? Did I actually was I part of that? Like, really? Because we're so familiar with ourselves, we just go on, right? I mean, I think I ran 16, 17 workshops so far this year, with a couple more booked in. And, 18 months ago, that wasn't, even workshops were non-existent. And I go, wow, did I do, like, there's just this point. So when you look back, and I still have so much love and compassion for the guy as a teenager in those days. And even when I meet people and see myself in them at that age, or what, you know what I mean? It even changes the way I interact with them and the respect I have, and just try and add something that might make them think and change, because I can see that too, but absolutely, it gets me so excited about the future. I just think well, why not? I only said on a podcast, I was being interviewed the other day, and somebody asked me what my greatest fear was. And I said, these days, my greatest fear is, what if I don't do it? That terrifies me more than any failing.
Yeah.
Like, and all of a sudden, the whole perspective changes. And if we're willing to embrace the mistakes that we've made and the lessons, and know that's just part of being human, and not let it be our anchor to holding us from back and using it as our stories to stop us from moving forward. If we can start to really just let go of that and appreciate that was, an alignment of things that's been able to allow us to grow on our evolution. Absolutely, some people, quote unquote, will get it tougher than others and so forth. But no matter what cards we dealt with, they're the cards we got. And we have to work with that. That's it. That's all we have. Like, there's no other way around it. And as that relationship has changed for me, then I get really excited, because you come back to the present moment, you come back to identify who you are, and then all that energy that you're expending on your past history and the reasons and things you can rationalize, or the judgments you might have for yourself, or whatever the mistakes you made, you can draw all that energy back and start bringing it to yourself and directing it into something more meaningful and purposeful. And as you do that, it's game on. Like life gets great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said there about, because we do sort of expend a lot of our energy looking back with regret and resentment. And while we're doing that, we're shifting and sending our energy to the past, and you can't create from there. You can only create from the present moment you're in now. So, if you're a listener now, I want you to think about the things that you're potentially not letting go of in the past, that are actually keeping you chained to it. It might even be the past as yesterday. Someone said something to you that made you feel a certain way and you're still holding on to that today. You can't create from that. You can't sit down and become a better version of yourself while you're still hooked into the argument, the person who cut you off in traffic, the regrets you have because you didn't do something. Well, make a choice today and sit down and go, well, you know what, I'm going to start reversing that. It's going to start moving forward, let it go and move forward. So you do some amazing work. And I know you've mentioned before, you know, you become really curious about life. What's something that you think back now and go, wow, I became really curious about that. It might have been either outside of your comfort zone a few years ago. It might be something perhaps that's been taboo, but now it's all part of either your daily practice or what you're teaching people. Let's get a little bit more curious about some of the things that you actually do with your clients and in your life. So what's something that you think, oh, this is really going to make people think I'm a bit woo-woo or something like that? Let's go crazy.
There's a long list.
There is. And before you answer this is the reason I wanted to ask it, because you have actually, everything you've said, you've gone out of your comfort zone, come back in, gone out, gone. So this is you removing the beliefs about certain things and pushing yourself forward to just be curious about it. It doesn't mean you're going to adopt it, get addicted to something or whatever it might be. It's about, okay, how does this work? What's the response it's getting within me? So let's hear some stuff that you've been doing outside of your comfort zone.
Okay. So probably of more recent exploring the wellness space, the hands down, the biggest thing that got me out of my comfort zone was working with a shaman.
Yep.
And doing a ceremony, what is called working with a plant medicine called ayahuasca. And that was probably, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. So I was starting to look at different modalities of healing. And shamanism is another modality, which is a ritual that's been practiced in the Amazon jungle for thousands of years. And I was curious, but I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified because it's a very powerful psychedelic, and what they talk about, it purges the soul. So when people ask me, well, what was it like? I always say it was like actually removing a splinter from my soul. That's the only analogy I could take to do with it. Now, you got to remember, I was somebody that didn't do drugs. I didn't I was ferociously on a mission to help people. I was building 180 Nutrition, and I had the opportunity of 2 friends of mine asked me, would I go along? And the reason why I was asked to go along is that the 2 friends were my ex-flatmates in London. And one was a complete introvert and one was a complete outrovert. And I was probably somewhere in the middle. But one of my friends, the introvert, had been suffering from depression. He was kind of really reserved and holding himself back. And my other friend said, look, would you like to look at this? I think it might work. Do you want to come along as support? And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try it. But I made the decision. It took nearly 12 months to do it. I was so terrified. And it became, because I'd agreed with myself to try this and explore it, because I've then become ferociously researching. I was looking at things, and at the same time, the closer I got to it, I became more and more terrified. And I got to the point on the very day I was supposed to go and drink this substance. Now, just to give you an idea, the side effects are vomiting and diarrhea, because you're purging. It's like a detox. It's not pleasant. What they say, it's like a mirror looking back at you. You start to see what's going on at the cellular level. Now, I didn't fancy any of that at all. And the day I came, I literally was going to walk away, and just my whole body, I'd never noticed my whole body have a involuntary response to me not being able to control it. It was almost like, oh my God, I am absolutely terrified and I cannot do anything about it. And now do I go through it and see if my fears are real, or do I walk away and leave it and maybe never learn something about myself that I could? So I had this whole battle going on, and I decided to go and do it. And when I done it, I'll never forget, it was the first moment, Georgia, that I had experienced pure surrender to anything. And because I drank this substance, and I remember I had to go back and lay down, and I thought, oh, I'm on. And the moment I surrendered, I remember just relaxing every cell in my body. I remember just opening my palms, closing my eyes, going, okay, I'm in. I trust you. And I had 100% trust. And I just completely let go. And the moment I did that, the whole fear evaporated in that moment before anything happened. And I couldn't believe it. And I was like, the mind games that I told myself that whole time. And that was probably the biggest lesson I got from the whole thing. And then I had this experience that lasted 7 hours. But the whole thing was a beautiful experience. And I literally got up the next day, not the same person that when I went into the ceremony. And I don't know how listen, like, it's become a very popular thing to go and do, literally, but if anyone is looking at these things, I would certainly, it needs huge respect, but it certainly can be quite an amazing experience. So that was probably the first time ever I'd felt done something courageous that was way beyond myself, but it felt right in my heart. It wasn't like I was forcing it. There was something bigger than me telling me, you really need to do this, but I just didn't understand why, or didn't any concept. But then it revealed itself, and then when I came out of it, I was able to look back at that and go, that's incredible. Yeah. Now I get the message,
And that's such a great example for people to understand that what you've done there is, you were asked to do something. You didn't go into it just blindly either. You did research. You spent 12 months researching this beforehand. Yeah. So, you don't want to get caught when people are about to do something. You don't want to get them caught in analysis paralysis where they just keep going, well, I don't know, I'm just going to keep researching. So you did that, but also as you're going through it, you hit this real fear. Like your body was encapsulating that fear. I can just imagine, I was feeling it when you were talking about it. And then, that's your body's response to your mind and your thoughts, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can't express how big a lesson it was, because now every time I notice my body, like fear responses, but now I'm so consciously aware of it. And I'm like, the first thing I ask myself these days, is this real? Is this a genuine response? Should I be fearful right now? Or am I just behaving? Is my body behaving in a way because it's been entrained for so long to start acting up like that? So I have a much different, and meditation has been a huge component of that. So all of a sudden, the situations that I'm dealing on a daily basis in life, I'm starting to look at them, and where they might have held me back for 10 years before, I could maybe move through something on that day, and there's so many things that we want to do in our life and we want to move towards, but then all of a sudden we don't really look at the underpinning reasons why we don't do it. It all comes back down to, like we said at the start, we don't believe we can do it. We have a fear wrapped around it. We might want to be a public speaker, but we're terrified of getting up in front of people. But yet we've got this message that we burst in to get out, sort of thing. So it's like, how can we start to change that relationship and start to look at these things differently, how we see ourselves and how we see the actual perceived threat that's going on, which ain't true most of the time. Yeah. It's just trained.
I love what you said there, because now, because of that whole experience, you now can recognize fear in your body, correct? This is what I'm just, tell me if I'm wrong. So you're recognizing fear in your body. And instead of letting that control you, you're actually you're asking yourself a question. Is this true? Is this fear true? Have I just made it up? Have I made up this fear with some beliefs that I have in the past and I haven't really thought it through? And in that moment now, you probably find you can move through fear a lot quicker. Much quicker. Because you're asking that question.
But the only way you can do it is by practicing it. So you have to start finding things in your life that do make you uncomfortable and do make you a little bit fearful. But you just start leaning in. One of the other things you were saying about, like, all these stuff, woo-woo stuff, whatever you've been doing. One thing we do every week now is an ice bath.
Yeah.
And there's huge, I won't go into this, but there's huge studies around cold exposure to help, especially the immune system, mitochondrial function, and cell function, and mental strength. There's so many things. Your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, anyway. But when I have to get in water at 0 to 1 degrees, there's two things I can do. I can go freak out and get out, or I can learn to surrender. So my body, every time we do an ice bath, there's always that feeling, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm about to get in this bloody thing. That's 1 degrees. Now, and I've got all the health benefits. You know, your endorphins are flying afterwards. You feel like bulletproof the rest of the day. I mean, trust me, this is in a controlled environment as well. It's not like we get in there and come out that we're blue and you can't move because you've actually frozen to the ice or anything. But when you get in there, there's a space that you can find that sits beyond the cold, and within yourself you can really start to become the observer, and then you can surrender, and then you can just actually end up enjoying it, which is a real thing. So you start to, what was once perceived as a threat becomes almost like a challenge, and that challenge leads to a really good outcome. And I think the metaphors in life are so prevalent to these little things, but because I'm doing it on a weekly basis, and I find other things too, but they keep you so sharp. They allow you to go, oh, that's right. You know, so when other situations arise, you've got these simple tools, but it's the simple tools that are allowing you to apply it on a practical application, because most of the time we're stuck in our heads without actually doing the work, you know, when those moments come up. So we can get excited and it becomes fun and it becomes a ritual, you know.
It sounds to me like your weekly ice baths are strengthening your courage muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
Because the more you do it, the more courageous you become. You go, I'm overcoming this silly fear, because, you know, we all think that we're going to freeze to death when we're getting something cold. I've done an ice bath experience, and I did exactly what you said. I got in and I just let go, and I was fine. And in fact, when they said the time's up, I could have stayed in there longer because I had to let go.
Yeah.
I just went, you know what? My body knows what to do. It knows how to keep me alive. I'm in a controlled environment, and I just sat there and let it do its thing.
Yeah, totally.
So you've got we're probably not going to go into everything today, but you've got so many experiences and you've got so much that you're bringing to the world. So if people want to get hold of you, join your tribe, your community, how do they do that, Guy? How can people learn more about your journey, what it is you offer? And I know you run amazing workshops because I've been to one of them. How can people find you?
I think the mothership is guylawrence.com.au. Like, if they go back to that, it's there. And, you know, I have a weekly podcast, which I'm very proud of, that has amazing conversations just like this with different people from all around the world. And then, of course, I've got my workshops, which we do, which is basically unpacking the concepts of some of the things we touched upon today, but gives people a practical roadmap, if you like, to find that treasure that we spoke about at the start. Yeah. And also I have an online membership as well called Learning Academy, which is a very affordable monthly membership that allows people to take it one step further. So my goal there is actually bringing people together where they can feel part of something bigger than themselves and have these conversations with other people. And there's a really good dynamic going in there, where we're pushing the boundaries more and more as well. Yeah,
good. So you're stepping outside of that comfort zone on a regular basis and playing and having some fun and playing with life, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. So if you were to leave a final message to our listeners to help them in any area of their lives and something that you've learned on your journey, what would be your final words for everyone?
My final words would literally just have to be like, get curious, don't wait. Just start exploring that itch inside that nobody else can scratch but you, and take your time with it. Like, you don't have to go like a bull out of a gate and you know, turn the house upside down. But I think, you know, try something different. Just so you might surprise yourself, no matter what that is. And I think belief can be cultivated either way. you know, for the negative or the positive. And it's just finding ways of being able to cultivate that and nurture that, just like a beautiful plant growing or whatever that might be, and allow ourselves, like, we're all worth it. We all deserve it. You know, it doesn't matter who we are, what we do, who we think we are. You know, we're all human beings at the end of the day. And it's just about you've got to start to, you got to find time for yourself. You got to fill your own cup up. You've got to really just come from that place first. And then if you're willing to do that, get curious, you can be the best version for everyone else around you and your family, your friends, your co-workers. And life can become a joy. It really can.
I love it. And I love that analogy. Fill your cup up until, I guess, fill yourself up, and then you can overflow and impact the world around you. So
that's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Guy. As always, I love chatting with you, and I love the work that you're doing in the world. And I have to attest to your podcast. I listen to it on a regular basis, and I'm so inspired by you and your guests. So those that are listening, jump on over to the Guy Lawrence podcast and wrap your ears around it. So thank you so much, Guy. I really appreciated having you today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So how was that with Guy? I love this human being. He's making an incredible difference in the world. And we only really scratched the surface with him today. I knew when I was getting him on the podcast, there were so many different avenues we can go down. He has interviewed some amazing people on his podcast, and I would have loved to speak to him about that. But I think the best thing you can do is jump on over to his podcast and have a listen to some of those interviews. Amazing, insightful and incredible people he's been able to get in contact with and get their insights. I also think that what he's doing out there is really teaching a new way of living and filling your own cup up. So if Guy is jump onto his website, and if he is running a workshop in your area, I highly recommend you get along and have a listen to what he's doing and pay attention to. And what he's saying there in that podcast was around, you know, being curious. Just gradually take yourself out of your comfort zone. It only has to be one step at a time, but take yourself out. And if you need to come back to your comfort zone, that's totally okay. And he says, you know, take your time with that. Have a journey. So try something new on a regular basis, because life, when you really embrace life and all the beauty that's out there, there is so much that you can add to your cup. And it may not be ayahuasca experience. It might not be an ice bath. For you, it might be going and spending some time in a community. It might be stopping and talking to a homeless person. It might be trying a different type of food. It could be anything. But what you'll do is you start getting curious and start moving outside of your comfort zone. You're going to find magic, and more than likely you're going to bump into your purpose. You're going to bump into your passion, but you won't find it if you keep doing the same thing every day. So thank you so much for being a part of the Alice in Wonderland podcast. I love bringing these guests to you. If you've enjoyed this, please leave a message, leave a review, hit a like, get a tick, whatever it is on the platform you're listening to. And also remember, just as Guy said, stay curious. There's a lot of magic out there for you to embrace with your own personal life. So I'll see you on the next episode.
Today is turning into the most curious adventure I've ever had.